want to shout amen, go on girl, or boy, or ooh, shut your mouth. It's what makes me nod my head in affirmation and want to talk back to the book, or call someone on the phone and hold them hostage and make them listen to the words that have resonated within my spirit. Poetry is the art of penning your thoughts, ideas, recollections, and dreams into language that is precise, descriptive, and imaginative. It's deeply personal, yet universal. It's one's attempt to understand the world through literary composition, and although it may be written, it is always meant to be heard. The reason poetry is so hard to define is because it takes on many forms. Sometimes it even looks like prose. A German poet once said, if you want to understand poetry, you have to go to its origins. If you want to understand the poet, you have to go to the poet's home. And that's exactly what Richard Wright does in Black Boy. He takes us on a lyrical journey into his world, wherein he shares with us symbolic moments of his life that exposes all of his hunger. Literally,
hunger stole upon me so slowly that at first I was not aware of what hunger really meant. Hunger had always been more or less than I ever when I played. But now I began to wake up at night to find hunger standing in my bedside, staring at me. This new hunger about me scared me, made me angry and resistant.
emotionally.
Nevertheless, I was so starved for association with people that I allowed myself to be seduced by it all. And for a few months, I lived the life of an optimist.
Intellectually?
I hungered for the sharp, frightening, breathtaking, almost painful excitement that the story had given me, and I vowed that as soon as I was old enough, I would buy all the novels that were and read them to feed the thirst for violence that was in me, for intrigue, plotting, for secrecy, for blood murders.
And metaphorically?
I would hurl words into the darkness and wait for its echo. And if an echo sounded, no matter how faintly, I would send others words to tell, to march, to fight, to create a sense of hunger, a life that gnaws in us all, to keep alive in our hearts a sense of the inexpressibility human.
And if that isn't poetry, I don't know what it is.
A poet, Dr. Ashia Hall, Akasha Hall. I'm sorry.
Good evening, everyone. I am very happy to be here, and who I have helping me, Mars Christopher. He and I just met. He's 11th grade at Home High. His favorite thing in the world to do is dance. He said it transports him out of anything, even when he just did something wrong. That takes him in the next place. And last week he told me about himself that he can do anything to his mind. Yes. Helping me with this presentation of mine. I'm here because Patrick knows my work as an African American literary critic. I've published 4 books on Black literature and on Black women writers, and 1 book of poetry. And I'm currently finishing my very first novel. And the book that I've done that's most relevant to what we're doing here is a book called Color, Sex, and Poetry, 3 Women Writers of the Harlem Renaissance. I'm very happy, actually, that Patrick asked me to come and do this, because I moved to Little Rock 2 years ago from Santa Cruz and Monterey, California, by way of Shreveport. which is where I was born and raised. And I like the block, and I want to be a more integral part of the Black community here. So this is a good beginning for me, and I'm very happy.
Welcome home.
My topic is Richard Wright and the Harlem Renaissance. And it's a little odd, and you'll understand why I say that after I get into it and get through to the end of it. But if you will just give me your attention, please, and follow along with me, we're going to end up at some points on that topic that will be relevant for us today. So, amen. Now, most of us have heard of the Harlem Renaissance. It is officially the beginning of modern African-American literature. There was literature before, but this is when it really gets set and really gets its own voice and meaning. That period occurred roughly between the end of World War II and what white historians like to call the Great Depression, even though we've had some great ones even before that one. So if you want to think about the period, think roughly that the Harlem Renaissance heyday was the 1920s. Okay. So this time, for a number of historical reasons, was a time of great racial assertiveness, and it was a time of cultural flowering in all of the arts. It was the time when there were poems like Claude McKay's poem, "If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and pinned, and then the glorious spots are around us, marked with blood," and it goes on and on. So it was a time of that kind of racial domesticity, kind of assertiveness. It was also the time when there were poems like County Cullen's poem, where he asked, "What is Africa to me?" And that was the time that Black people started to try to make a connection back to the motherland and try to figure out where were we then, the royalty, the kingness, the queenness, and all of that. So it was a time of that. It was a time also when a poet like Gwendolyn Bennett wrote a poem where she said, "Hey, brown boy, gee, I loved you all over." And it was a time when Black writers began to use the vernacular in formal literature, and it was a time when Black writers were celebrating that kind of Black love and all of the rest of it. And Langston Hughes wrote an essay at this time that he called "The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain." He said a lot of things, but among some of the things he says, "We younger Negro writers stand on the racial mountain, free within ourselves. The tom-tom laughs, the tom-tom cries. We're going to write what we want to. If white people are pleased, fine. If Black people are pleased, fine. We don't care. We're going to say what we have to say." So it had that kind of energy. You get the feeling of it. Okay, so that's what we understand about the Harlem Renaissance. Now, you remember I said it was during the 20s. What this means, of course, is that Richard Wright was not a part of the Harlem Renaissance, right? Okay, he was born in 1908, so that when Claude McKay wrote that poem, "If We Must Die," in 1917, Richard Wright was only 9 years old, starving in West Helena, okay? So, but during his time, and during his early teens, Richard Wright was already becoming the person, the man that he was to be. So the first excerpt that Morris is going to read was written when Richard Wright was about 13, 14 years old. He was in elementary school in Jackson, Mississippi. He was, like I said, 13, 14, but he was only at that point in the 5th grade. Right? He went ahead pretty quick, but that's where he was. So this is going to give you some idea of who Richard Wright was at that